welcome to another episode of Dry Eye Fireside Chat. I'm Dr. Damon Dierker coming to you from Indianapolis. Really excited to have my friend and colleague, Dr. Kelly Nichols, join us. She is the Dean of the University of Alabama at Birmingham School of Optometry. Dr. Nichols, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Go Blazers, I'll say.
So we have the topic that we're going to talk about in our chat is pattern recognition and using vital dyes, specifically fluorescein in dry eye disease. And this is something that, you and I do all day, every day, and have done that for decades. But sometimes, I think there's a lot of confusion around this. How do you use this? How do you fit it into a routine exam? Does it really change what we do? So we're going to talk about fluorescein and how to utilize that to best identify dry eye disease and masqueraders and maybe to help guide therapy. So Dr. Nichols, when we look at fluorescein, and we've used this in eye care for decades and decades, why do we use it? What is it? What exactly does it do for the ocular surface?
Yeah, it's a great vital dye, and that's why we've been using it for decades and decades. It gives us a lot of information. So, when you put it in to the tear film, it sort of integrates itself into the tear film. So, that provides a way in which to view the tears first off. But then as it starts to dissipate out and actually, do its magic, so to speak, it's going to fill in the gaps where cells used to be on the cornea. So, we call that superficial punctate keratitis or staining. And, you can have a variety of different patterns, when you put it in. You first have to make sure you have enough of it in. Most people use strips, and what you absolutely shouldn't use is fluorescein or one of the stickier versions when it has numbing medication in it as well, because that will eliminate your ability to see anything really on the cornea once you put that in. So always use a fluorescein strip if you're looking at the cornea and conjunctiva as a first step.
And that is a saline moistened strip, or do you have another technique for that?
No, I just use saline. And then there's a bit of a debate. Do you put it superiorly or do you put it in the inferior fornix? I think both are fine. Some people put a lot of fluorescein on and then, do the little flip to get some of it off. You just have to make sure you get enough in the eye to actually let it do its thing. But then it also has to dissipate out a little bit too. So in most of the time, if you're doing a dry evaluation, you'll do fluorescein tear film breakup time before you do corneal staining. And that's assuming that you haven't already done a non-invasive breakup time using another bit of instrumentation. In both scenarios, though, looking at the fluorescein is critically important. And you can do a dry evaluation by asking, straightforward questions, either giving them a survey, and then having a slit lamp, looking at it in white light, and then looking at it with fluorescein, and looking at the meibomian glands. You can get so much general information. So dry doesn't have to be super complicated, and fluorescein gets you a long way in that.
So then is something like using fluorescein as part of a comprehensive eye exam, do you think that's something that we should be embracing, or really just for the dry eye or ocular surface disease exam?
I'm a purist, so I'd like to say that it's involved in a routine eye exam so that you can decide whether or not there's something that's worrying you or that's a trigger enough for them to come back for an ocular surface exam. Then you get into how do I take eye pressure and such like that? And you can work all these things into the flow. After you look with fluorescein, you can put in an anesthetic drop and take pressure, or you can use some other way of taking pressure earlier in the exam or even after in the exam, depending on the instrumentation you have in your clinic. But I would always recommend using fluorescein strips in all scenarios.
And that's what I try to do is the first time I see any patient, I want to understand what that ocular surface looks like, and fluorescein tells me a lot, like you've laid out. Mm-hmm. So when we look at specifically dry eye disease or Kasich, Sjogren's, et cetera, what are the most common staining patterns that we should be looking for when we instill that fluorescein dye?
Right. So I would say in most instances, doctors are going to do a grade it's grade 1, 2, 3, or 4, meaning, 1 obviously is a little bit and 4 is the most severe. But if you participated in clinical trials, you want to get more into depth, you can look at it by region of the cornea, superior, inferior, nasal, central, and temporal, and grade each of those areas. That takes a bit more time, and you probably wouldn't do that in a routine eye exam setting, but you are generally trying to see how much staining you have. And usually you're going to have them, if you're going to have staining, you're going to have the most staining inferiorly, followed by nasally, and then temporally. And sometimes those are about the same. And then centrally is the next most common, and you're getting more rare there. And then certainly you shouldn't forget to look at the superior cornea, because that can, hint you towards other masquerading eye conditions. But all the areas are pretty important. But you do see inferior staining, obviously, the most commonly because of exposure and then also proximity to the meibomian glands.
Well, inferior staining, and then we see some more lateral staining, and then central. Does that drive your diagnostic code? So you put punctate keratitis in your chart. Does it change whether you call something dry eye or K-Sicca? Does it change how you treat somebody based on their fluorescein patterns?
I would say that, there's a variety of different codes you can use, of course, and none of it occurs in a vacuum. So you have to take the whole patient into consideration with what you have. But certainly I would say that, the more staining you have, obviously, the more significant it is, the more likely you are to have either more severe dry eye or something like Sjogren's at the same time. But any staining, to me, certainly central corneal staining, means you got to do something about it. It's an indication that there's like ocular surface damage, likely an inflammatory reaction going on in the cornea as well. That shouldn't be left on its own to not be managed. There are contact lenses where, your staining patterns are a little bit different. They tend to be, more nasal and temporal, or even outside of the cornea, because it's protected. The cornea is protected by the contact lens in some cases. And you can see staining with fluorescein on the conjunctiva. I mean, you don't need lissamine green. I think it's a really valuable tool to look at the conjunctiva. And a good tip with that is to make sure you use a Ratten filter. And those Ratten filters, if you don't have one, you can get from any rigid contact lens distributor. Go to a meeting, pick one up, contact your rep. They'll bring them to your office, or you can buy a Ratten 12 filter on Amazon. But that yellow filter with the blue light just gives you a great green glow that allows you to see the really fine punctate staining and staining on the conjunctiva as well.
Yeah, great pearls there. I agree with all of that. If you look at the dry eye patient versus something else that's not dry eye, whether it's NK, basement membrane dystrophy, exposure, what other patterns do you see commonly in OSD patients that would say, well, maybe they have dry and something else, or maybe something else altogether?
Yeah, the core Blackie test to see whether or not they have lid seal is important, especially if you see inferior corneal staining, to try and see if that's a component, an exposure component. Asking questions about the placement of their monitor, can make a difference too. If they're looking up towards stuff, you can see inferior corneal staining. That's maybe not a masquerader, but just an exacerbation of what they've got going on. Certainly, you can have more diffuse staining if you have things like allergic conjunctivitis or bacterial conjunctivitis. And super important, if you see a lot of staining and your patient really isn't reporting symptoms that match, like none or very limited, you really need to do corneal sensitivity testing, especially if they have diabetes or have had a history of having herpes, stromal, or epithelial keratitis, because you could have NK, like you mentioned earlier. And I don't think we're really good about testing corneal sensitivity and then being able, now we can manage that. There are therapies for that, which we didn't have before, and that can be really helpful.
They were getting better as a profession at that, but we still got a ways to go. And we do know that another reason someone can get NK is just chronic dry eye over decades and decades, a lot, especially if they have these other comorbidities or risk factors. So we've been doing this for decades. You've done it a lot more than me because you've been involved in a lot of clinical trials. But as a clinician, I mean, I'm doing it dozens and dozens of times every day. Are we still going to be talking about fluorescein 20 or 30 years from now?
I'd like to say no. I mean, it is such a valuable tool, but until imaging can help capture individual cell loss, for example, as you scan the cornea, or an instrument scans the cornea for you, I ultimately can imagine that somebody could open their eye and then have some sort of scan of their cornea, and it would tell you what grade of staining or damage there is on the ocular surface. That would be fantastic. How many years did you ask about? Did you say 10? Or
I mean, 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah. 20, 30 years from now, probably.
How long we've been doing it. Are we going to still be doing this in the same way, or is some other technology going to take over?
Now, I would hope some other technology could take over. Having said that, this Schirmer test was first used in 1903. So that's been a century in the making, more than a century in the making. We still use that. Some would say it's barbaric, but it hasn't gone away. So I'll hedge my bets that we'll have technology, but we're still for a long time going to be using fluorescein staining.
Fair enough. Dr. Nichols, thank you so much. A lot of takeaways here, and I hope to see everybody again on an upcoming episode of Fireside Chat.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
My pleasure.